He gained infamy for kidnapping hundreds of Nigerian schoolgirls and led a campaign of terror in West Africa for more than a decade. Reports that the leader of Boko Haram has been killed are still unconfirmed, but if true, is it a cause for celebration or concern that a potentially worse enemy could take his place? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Boko Haram's Abubakar Shekau. Now, this is the sixth time since 2009 that Abubakar Shekau has been declared dead. Details vary, but most accounts say he detonated an explosives-filled vest in Nigeria's Sambisa Forest during a gun battle with the Daesh-linked Islamic State in West Africa province, also known as Iswap. Now, Shekau has spent the last decade as Nigeria's enemy number one. He's known for using children as human shields, soldiers, and slaves, with murder and torture as punishment for dissent. Under his direction, Boko Haram kidnapped almost 300 schoolgirls from the town of Chibok in 2014. He oversaw the deaths of at least 30,000 people and the displacement of millions more in northeastern Nigeria. The U.S. State Department, which once had a $7 million bounty on Shekau's head, says if he is indeed dead, it would be a positive development for counter-terrorism efforts in the region. But others aren't so sure if Shekau's death will deal a serious blow to one of the world's most brutal terror groups or simply give rise to others in the region. Well, our panelists join me now to discuss that. And from Abuja, we have Kola Ologbondiyan. He is the National Publicity Secretary for the opposition People's Democratic Party. And from Lagos is Remi Sonaya, a presidential candidate for the Kowa Party in Nigeria's 2015 election. Thanks both so much for being with us. Remi Sonaya, let me start with you and where you stand on the actual impact of Shekau's reported death. Is Nigeria a safer country now, or does Iswap or others simply fill the void?
What impact Shekau's death will have on Nigeria, really, I do not believe that it is much, that we can be very hopeful at this time. Like you said in your introduction, this is the fifth time or so that he has been reported killed. And unfortunately, there are many, many other challenges that we have as a country. And it is not only about Shekau and Boko Haram. Unfortunately, we are confronted on all sides with kidnappers and bandits and cattle rustlers and killer herdsmen, so that I am not sure that anybody is jubilating really over the death of Shekau at this point.
Okay.
A death, we are told, that has not even been confirmed yet.
Let me ask Kola if you are on the same page.
Well, yes, I'm on the same page with her. Here, like rightly said, is somebody who has been declared as dead as many times as possible. And yet, even the federal government, as well as the military, has not been able to confirm to Nigerians whether he's dead or he's alive. On account of that, it creates a sense of morbidity. I mean, a sense of a morbid humor among Nigerians if truly he's dead. But having said that, I do not think that the challenges confronting Nigeria today is limited to the existence of Shekau or to his death.
Right.
Because we have seen other various forms of insurgency, like banditry, like full-blown terrorism, like kidnapping. For instance, you cannot travel within 2 hours moving from Abuja to any other state. You are scared, you have to engage in prayer and fasting if you have a trip to make. So all these situations have taken the issue of insecurity in Nigeria beyond the Boko Haram.
But Kola, let me ask you, I mean, why did the government then make such bold promises to defeat Boko Haram, and now they're using a very morbid sense of humor to admit that it is not defeated, that even though Shekau may have died, all the problems are still there, if not worse than when the government first came to power. Was all that just part of kind of an election lie, or was there really a plan to defeat Boko Haram and all that banditry that just failed to come to fruition?
Well, it is very strange to us in the People's Democratic Party, like you have rightly asked, why it is difficult for government, and I mean the federal government, led by the APC President Muhammadu Buhari, to be definitive about the characters that is confronting Nigeria in the asymmetry war. Is the asymmetry war limited to the Boko Haram? Who are the insurgents? Who are the ones behind them? Why are they killing Nigerians? Why this level of kidnapping? The major challenge in our country today is that it appears as if the body of intelligence gathering has failed. And as such, even as a people, we are in a war that we cannot define who our enemies are. Unfortunately, we have a president who in 2015 came with a three-pronged promises of fighting insurgency, of fighting corruption, and of reviving the nation's economy. 6 years down the line, we are in a more precarious and a worse form of challenges than we had in 2015 when he came into office.
Okay. Remy, let me ask you for your take on what the government line actually is. I mean, they say they're in a war that they cannot define. You admit yourself that there are now almost countless groups of criminals, extremists of all sorts that are challenging Nigerian security forces. I mean, does Nigeria really know who and what it's up against when it comes to bringing peace, especially to the northeast of the country?
I think that is precisely the problem that the citizens have. We are at a loss to comprehend why a group of people would be able to hold our entire nation captive. And yet we have an ex-general in charge of the affairs of our nation. So it really is very disconcerting. We don't know what to think. I would not have thought it possible, personally, that it will take so long to disarm, to overcome whatever group, whatever armed group, whatever militia, whatever insurgents and so on, would be threatening Nigeria for so long. I wouldn't have thought it possible. Yeah.
Let me bring in.
We are today.
Right. Let me bring in at this point from London. We actually have Philip Adaiwor. He is the chairman of the UK chapter of Nigeria's ruling party, the All Progressives Congress. Philip, thanks for being with us. You may have just heard there our other panelists' comments about what enemy Nigeria is actually fighting right now. Kola described it as being in a war that they cannot even define. I'm wondering what you think the factors are here. Why are Nigerians fighting Nigerians here and imprisoning their own people, in effect? And why can't the government actually defeat them?
Thank you, Adrian, for having me. I think that the problem we are having with the whole of this setup, Boko Haram and all the other challenges, that we have to see them for what they are. We have to look at the foundational problems. There was religion at the beginning, and I don't think that that issue is been addressed as it should have been addressed. I think that there is also a mix-up of poverty as well as the forced and terrorizing of communities. So I think that, first of all, the idea of Nigerians, terrorizing Nigerians, I think that it doesn't stop just at that. I think that we also have to look at the fact that a lot and a good number of the people who are involved in these terror activities are actually not Nigerians. This has been spoken over by several groups, including the government. They are not Nigerians. I heard what Remy said here about, not thinking that this will have lasted so long. But I think that when you have a problem in the community that is not dealt with in such a way that the people are won to the side of victory or to the side of government, they are going to have challenges. Boko Haram has been very smart. Whoever they represent has been very smart. They come into communities, not just terrorize the communities, but they also subtly try to win the heart and the minds of people, of some members of the community. So regardless of what the military is doing, and they are doing an excellent job, it is not a matter of guns and bombs and all of that. You have Nigerians who, because of their religious views, because of their religious persuasions, because of what they are benefiting from these terrorists, from both within and from outside Nigeria, they are cooperating with them.
Right.
People are selling stuff to these terrorists. People are giving them information about military movement. People are helping them to hide away in places.
Right.
So I think that is. Yeah, okay.
You talk about the vulnerable populations that are, in effect, conned by these extremist groups and then find easier recruits among these vulnerable populations. But most would argue that they are vulnerable because of so much poverty and corruption that the government has failed to deal with. And in the case of Boko Haram in particular, this is a group that's become infamous for its abduction of girls, which, as you know, we'll be talking about in a minute. But there are also thousands of young boys who've been kidnapped and abused by extremist groups and those criminal gangs. Help us understand, what treatment is there now for them to be saved and rehabilitated as child soldiers to stop this violence from, again, spiraling into another generation of Nigerians?
On the part of government, I would have expected an intense war footing information campaign. You see, because I think that part of this war should be information based. It should be community driven. How much resources is available to government for this kind of work is what one is not very sure of. We have to accept something, and this is the fact that Nigeria is population heavy, but in terms of available resources, we are a resource poor country. True, corruption is being intense. I don't think that people are giving up on bad behavior of stealing government resources. Even when these budgets are given and people are put in charge, people just have a mindset of stealing government funds. And I think that we are Nigerians, and we have to be willing, regardless of our political persuasions, to call these things by name. It is our duty to ensure that issues of corruption, issues of bad behavior in government, they are dealt with by publicly naming and shaming individuals.
Kola, let me get final words from you.
Well, I think that what's important, first and foremost, is the ability of the federal government to define who our enemies are. I recall President Muhammadu Buhari declaring that those who are invading our nation are Sahelians, people from Sahel region. If they are people from Sahel region, what has government done to stop invaders from taking advantage of our people in Nigeria? So it's extremely difficult for us to understand who the real enemies of this nation are. I do not want to limit this discussion to the idea that Nigerians are fighting Nigerians. Yes, I agree. I will agree to some extent that those who are kidnapping for ransom perhaps might be Nigerians.
Okay. Remy, final words from you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I would like to caution against blaming the victims. It is the responsibility of the government, of those we have elected and entrusted with managing our affairs to keep us safe. So we cannot now place the blame on the people in any way. We are victims, and those who are supposed to take care of us should take their jobs seriously. I think that is my own word, because what we have seen seems to be a kind of laxity, a lack of seriousness in dealing with the issues confronting the Nigerian citizens. Our lives are exposed to so much danger. It's like, the lives do not matter.
Remy
So
Sonaya,
please, yeah.
I will have to give you the last word. We're unfortunately completely out of time for this segment of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us. Abubakar Shekau became a global pariah after kidnapping almost 300 schoolgirls from Chibok, Nigeria. Canadian journalist Melissa Fung, herself kidnapped by rebels in Afghanistan, made it a personal mission to talk to some of the girls abducted by Boko Haram, to explore their experience and attempts at recovery. Her journey is chronicled in her feature-length documentary called Captive. Here's a look.
I'd like you to talk to one of the commanders. Yep. I sent her to her brother, and she has sat and saw Shekau face to face because her brother is second in command.
His second in command.
Yeah. Her husband was a very big commander. Her husband was one of the guys that kidnapped Chibok girls, and he did a lot of killing. Just patching her to see whether I can use her to bring her brother and bring Shekau out to surrender and give me the remaining Chibok girls.
It was 2014 when the Chibok girls were taken. We all saw the headlines, the horror of almost 300 girls. We had, Michelle Obama with the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. And then to hear that about 100 or maybe fewer had been rescued. The world celebrates their release, and that's it. Nobody mentions that there are girls still missing.
Dama ai mun yi da ita akan cewa in sun koma da su wa'ancan matan da mai gidan shi ya bashi akan za mu zo da su da ita.
The Chibok girls.
The Chibok girls are with her brother?
Yes.
With her brother.
The remaining Chibok girls?
Yes.
Has she seen the Chibok girls?
Well, joining me now from London is journalist and filmmaker Melissa Fung. Melissa, thanks so much for being with us. We were just discussing more of the military and geopolitical dynamics of this conflict, but you have focused solely on the victims of Boko Haram, young girls who've been abducted and endured the most horrific experiences. Why was it important that their stories were heard this way, the way you've told them?
Well, Andrea, thanks so much for having me, first of all. I think I was compelled to tell the story because of my personal experience. About 12 years ago, I was on assignment in Afghanistan, and I was kidnapped myself and held hostage for a month by Afghan militants. And when I was released, I had all the best help. I had great trauma therapists, a lot of support, friends and family. And when I heard that some of these girls taken by Boko Haram had escaped, but didn't have any of the help, and in fact, their communities were shunning them because they're seen as wives of Boko Haram, I really felt compelled to try to tell their stories because I can't imagine dealing with the trauma of captivity as well as trying to reintegrate into a community that is suspicious of you.
Exactly. And I mean, yeah, they're not the wives of Boko Haram. They are effectively child rape victims. And
Exactly.
How disturbing is it then to know that so many, especially young girls, are still being abducted by these extremist groups and that the government has really seemed powerless to stop it?
It's actually getting worse, the situation now, because what's happening is that bandit groups, not necessarily even Boko Haram, but basically bandits, have realized that kidnapping for ransom is a really easy way to make money. So what you're seeing in northern Nigeria now, I mean, Boko Haram operated in the northeast, but now, we just saw over the weekend more younger children were taken from a school west of the area Boko Haram normally operates in. And so it is becoming a bigger and bigger problem that the government can't seem to kind of get its head around how to deal with.
Right. I mean, we do understand that the government is struggling with its war with extremists and those criminal groups that you mentioned, but are they doing what they can for the victims themselves post their release or their escape?
There is so much need in northern Nigeria because of the number, just the sheer number of survivors of Boko Haram kidnappings. And so what the government has done, I think wisely, is partnered with many NGOs, local NGOs who are doing great work. We feature one in the film run by Dr. Fatima Akalu called NEEM, N-E-E-M. And what they do is they provide counseling. They go into schools and provide counseling services for girls who have managed to escape or been rescued and are still dealing with the effects of trauma. They even have a program called Counselors on Wheels, where they have psychologists in tuk-tuks drive into small remote villages to try to offer some of that help.
But you can imagine how much more they could really do if the government put forth a concerted effort to really help rehabilitate the victims of these extremist groups.
There's just so much need.
Absolutely.
There's just so much need, Andrea.
And another, point that's made so strongly in your film is that these women and girls, they're not just victims of Boko Haram. They also fall victim to societal punishment once they're freed or once they escape. They're rejected by their communities because it's believed they're dangerous or that they can't be trusted anymore. Can there not at least be some education for their communities to teach people to be more sensitive and to understand that these girls need more caring and understanding than ever?
I think slowly that's happening through some of these NGOs in the communities, talking about captivity and rape and trauma. And that's sort of something that culturally they're not used to talking about. So I think that's starting to happen. But don't forget, Boko Haram has been very smart in using girls they've taken, sending them back to communities as suicide bombers. And so that is the main reason why communities are afraid when they see some of the girls that I met, when they escaped and went back to their communities, people ran away thinking that they had a bomb strapped to them. So I can't, it's trauma on top of trauma, really. Absolutely. But I do think now there is more education happening around the subject.
Hopefully there is, because, in the case of Nigeria especially, it's not just about what happens to a single victim. It's also about the fallout and how that victim's trauma affects an entire society and the generations below her children, for example. Does Nigeria recognize that treating that fallout actually helps all Nigerians?
I think when you talk to the experts who are doing it, they recognize that they do not want this trauma to be passed on to future generations. Right now, I think the government is just too preoccupied with tamping down the insurgency and the conflict. And I think, it kind of falls to the experts and the NGOs to offer those kinds of services.
Right. Melissa, we always want to hope that everyone can overcome. But are there women, in Nigeria in particular, who cannot recover from being traumatized and brainwashed as badly as they have by groups like Boko Haram?
Andrea, I profiled 3 girls for my film, and I, made the offer to help them finish high school. One just couldn't do it. The other two, we got them into a boarding school. Their grades just were not good enough. So the boarding school asked them to leave. We finally found another boarding school. I got them a tutor to try to help them. And just last week, they decided they didn't want to continue. And so the effect of that trauma, the depth of it, I don't even know. We don't even come close to understanding.
And again, it becomes society's problem. It's not just the victim's problem. Very quickly, Melissa, just, hearing that Abubakar Shekau was killed, did it give you any sense of relief that maybe fewer people, especially those women and girls in Nigeria, will suffer? Or do you think it's a void now that will be easily filled by other extremist groups?
I think it is already easily filled. Boko Haram splintered a few years back, and there's another leader, al-Barnawi, and he heads up a splinter section of Boko Haram. And, I can see now with the death of Shekau, if he really is dead, that he would be trying to consolidate power. So, and with these other criminal groups starting to kidnap school children, I sadly, I'm not so optimistic that we're going to see an end to this anytime soon.
Melissa Fung, thank you so much for joining us on the Newsmakers. We greatly appreciate it. And thanks so much to our viewers for joining us as well. We'll see you next time.